Sveiki. Mykolo Romerio universitete, Komunikacijos institute gegužės mėnesį viešėjo profesorius iš vieno geriausių Meksikos universitetų, Universidad Panamericana, profesorius daktaras Mariano Navarro. Profesorius Navarro yra Komunikacijos mokyklos dekanas, jis taip pat yra vizituojantis tyrėjas tokiose aukštosiose mokyklose kaip Westminster universitetas Junginėje Karalystėje bei Aivos universitetas Junginėse Amerikos valstijose. Trečias yra kelių tarptautinių akademinių asociacijų, dirbančių su komunikacijos, filosofijos, istorijos bei religijos temomis narys. Vizito Mykolo Romerio universitete metu profesorius skaitė paskaitas komunikacijos ir skaitminės rinkodaros bakalauro studentams bei komunikacijos ir kūrybinių technologijų magistrantūros studentams. Profesorius maloniai sutiko pasikalbėti apie medijų dabartį, praeitį, ateitį, apie medijų būklę susietą su informacinių technologijų progresu, apie politinės komunikacijos niuansus bei kultūrinius panašumus bei skirtumus tarp Lietuvos ir Meksikos. Taigi, tikiuosi pritrauksime jūsų dėmesį artimiausiai valandai, o pokalbį vesiu aš, Komunikacijos instituto direktorius Mykolo Romerio universitete, Marius Kalinauskas. Kviečiame klausyti. So, welcome, Mariano.
Thank you so much.
Mariano is a dean, correct?
That is correct.
Yeah, you're a dean in Universidad Panamericana.
That is correct as well.
And you are working with communication and media philosophy.
That is correct.
Okay, so everything is correct. My intelligence works just fine.
And your data does as well.
Yeah, I wanted to start from a get-go about your field of expertise. So could you say a few words about yourself, who you are, what do you do?
Absolutely. But first of all, I want to say that I'm very happy that we're doing this podcast. I'm honored to be here. This has been a wonderful experience all this stay at Mykolo Romerio. And as you said, my name is Mariano Navarro. I am the Dean of the School of Communication at Universidad Panamericana in Mexico City. And I work mainly in philosophy and theory of communication, but I also do communication history, particularly, which I understand is one of the topics we're going to discuss today, and the relationship that the U.S., the United States, has exerted in Mexican public sphere. Well, we will get to that. That historical line of research is one of the things that I write about and talk about and teach about as well. But I also do media theory and media philosophy in the terms or in relation to how media shape our understanding of the world, I would say.
Okay, so a few things that interest us in here, because Lithuania is pretty far away from Mexico, and
it is.
And some Lithuanians don't even comprehend the size of this of the country. You are close to the United States.
Quite close.
Quite close. You are neighbors and you are economical partners, correct?
Absolutely.
And United States, if I may say so, is the most powerful country culturally, probably militarily as well.
Yes.
And these waves that events in the United States resonate, they affect us all. So, yes. But since you are living closest to the United States, tell me, how do these cultural shifts and changes actually affect Mexico? Yeah. And then my second part of the question: how does it affect all the world? How do you see it happening?
Okay, obviously that is a very broad question, and I'll try to answer to the best I can. But yeah, we are the neighbors to the south, to the United States, as you know, obviously, and we share one of the largest borders in the world. I think it's about the 10th largest border in the world, and I want to maybe stress that part, because that of course that means that we're not only geographically next to each other, but we actually come in close contact in so many ways, culturally certainly, and as you suggested. The United States is the most influential. It's a superpower in the full extent of the world, has been for a long part of the past and still this century. But of course, those power dynamics have been changing in so many ways. But the thing that even when you're neighbors to such a powerful country as the United States, that influence not only reflects in an unidirectional way in how the United States, by military power, hard power, economical power, we would maybe call it, but also through the means of soft power, communication, and culture, how it shapes Mexico and how it has influenced Mexico to a certain extent, and the conscious efforts to do so that, of course, have been happening and taking place for most of the 20th century. But Mexico also, I would say it's a rather big country. There's 120 million people living in Mexico, Mexican citizens living in Mexico. There's around 20 million of Mexican citizens living in the United States legally. And there's, of course, as you all know, a lot of people crossing illegally the border and establishing a life in the United States of Mexican origin. And that amounts to an influence that it's also exerted from south the border to the United States, to the point that it is in the southern states of the U.S. Federation where you get to see all this very complex dynamics of two countries influencing each other. Of course, there's an influence for the United States and Mexico, but there is also a lot of influences that go way north, from the south to the north.
Okay, so basically you're telling that you kind of influence them, maybe even stronger than they influence you. Can we predict something like this?
Depending on who you ask, this question, of course, would get different answers and maybe some different degrees of unsettling sentiment. Because you probably know, and of course you know, and all the millions of persons listening to us might know as well that there have been concerns, even in certain intellectuals and theoreticians of international relations, let's say Huntington, on how whatever the United States culture was is changing due to demographic shifts and in patterns, like, for example, Latino migration, not only from Mexico, but from all Latin America. And this can surely be seen in so many ways. From maybe the very everyday examples that might be more important that we actually consider them to be like tacos and that kind of day-to-day stuff that you can get to buy or eat in the United States. But there's also a lot of influence, for example, in terms of the amount of people learning Spanish in the U.S. and the use of Spanish as, in certain states particularly, but I would say that overall the entire country, as a de facto second language. And there are places in the United States where you can get by quite easily with not trouble at all speaking Spanish. And I'm not talking about small Latino communities. I'm talking about big cities like Los Angeles, for example, or some other cities in Texas.
Okay, and of course, United States is a very powerful producer of cultural goods, like movies. So when in Lithuania, for the general Joes, when information reaches us, we get it from the movies, from the music, from various cultural imprints. So tell me, if Mexico is really that powerful, and we kind of sense it, what is the biggest lie and the biggest truth when you see this portrayal of this Mexican character, or Mexico as a country in general, in the films? Because this is what I teach to my students. Like, if you see that the screen is being tinted yellow, it means that somebody crossed the border, perhaps there in Mexico.
Absolutely,
so
yes.
what else do we have there that is truth and maybe less truth, and what is exaggerated? Yeah.
Crossing the border and probably with some illegal intent. But yes, absolutely. But I wouldn't say, I think that it is quite important, and this is one of the things that comes from the teaching I do in Mexico and in other places in the world, like I did here in Lithuania, that I got this very generous chance to do so. But let's consider the fact that besides being producers of content, media are also institutions, and mostly institutions that play by the rules of the market. And they try to stay above the line in terms of making some revenue to satisfy their shareholders. And this talk speaks of the structural arrangement of media being very complex cultural institutions. And for example, media in the United States, it's obviously very diverse. and it reaches in very different ways, different parts of the public or the population. And one of the most media that has most focus on Latino communities, not only Mexicans, it is actually in the United States aimed to Latino audiences. And I'm sure that everyone listening is also quite aware of the fact that there is this international mainstream media culture or media content production, like movies, and I mean big movie international hits like this Marvel franchises and so on, and Disney, for example. But there's also different subspheres, so to speak, of media content that do quite well, that are quite profitable, but are aimed toward particular portions or sections of the public, like African Americans, for example, like even religious media in the United States, and also Latino media, which actually it's done mostly in Spanish. There's a lot of there's a huge amount. One of the media capital in Spanish in the entire world is not in Mexico, it's not in Spain, but it's in Florida, and it is Miami. And that's one of the most important media hubs in the world.
And they're broadcasting in Spanish?
They're broadcasting in Spanish. There's two very important television networks in Spanish, Telemundo and Univision. And they are mostly broadcasting in Spanish, directed to Latino populations. That some of them only speak Spanish, and some of them have been assimilated to the United States way of life, so to speak. And I think that going back, I hope that this makes sense to your question. It is not that either Mexicans, Latinos in general, or other minorities in the United States are. Of course, there's a lot of stereotype representations of minorities in mainstream media, but sometimes it is through other channels or through other media subspheres that actually those communities can relate to. Not maybe the mainstream content of the media that is directed, I would say, towards the entire world. And that in that way it has to rely on these long-standing stereotypes that can be understood easily in every part of the world. And of course, that has been a problem, certainly.
Mm-hmm. Because you can just take a few examples. Like in Lithuania, like this generation that is like 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds, they grew up on telenovelas.
Yes.
So we've seen one Mexico, which is very like glamorous and people with suits, and even the workers wear white shirt. That's this very very romantic picture. And on the other fringe, you see like something like Sicario, the movie, yes, where you see cartels and fighting. So for us, when we drew this mental picture of what that country really is, despite the yellow tint of the color, is this very not only diverse culture, but it also very different. It's kind of polarized image of how do we cope with this image of Mexican. What is it? General Mexican. If you ask who is General Lithuanian, so we eat cepelini. We like basketball,
which I tried, by the way.
Is it
I
good?
like very much.
Is it good? Good.
Yes.
Thanks God, because rarely people from outside like this food.
Even next day cepelini. Sorry for interrupting, but yes.
Yeah. That's also an option.
Yes.
And we are. I would not say that we are a homogeneous society, but as a country we are way smaller. Yeah. So for us to understand those differences between even different regions is a bit of a hard cookie. So what about you? How could you say what are the character traits, features that are that could qualify somebody as a Mexican? Who are you as a representative of a nation? Culturally, I mean.
I think that is a great question, and I think that is a question that most Mexican writers and intellectuals have been asking themselves since Mexico started to exist, actually, in the as an independent nation in the 19th century. And the thing is, but it weighs. I think it goes way back to the fact that from the start, even from the prehistory of Mexico and most Latin American countries and nations, it goes to the origin of two different cultures and different views of the world colliding in a way to actually make up something new that was not European. I'm talking about the European culture, mainly the Spanish and the Portuguese empires, and conquering huge sections of the American continent and establishing there something that back in the day was seen as some sort of colonies that replicated to some extent European culture, either it was Spanish or Portuguese. But the real fact, I think, is that what was formed after the conquest was not an extension of European powers, but it was something different that did not existed before, and that was partly modeled and conformed by this European heritage, but that kept a lot of the indigenous pre-colonial cultural manifestations. If you go to Mexico, particularly in central, not only, but it is more concentrated in the center of the country, you will find, and it's everywhere, even from in the local cuisine, but also in the ways we talk and the names we give to streets and words that are still used. There's a lot of indigenous influence. And of course, there's a lot of writers, poets that can be quoted here. But the fact is that those two cultures, the Aztecs on one side, which were only one of the cultures, it was the most prominent, hegemonic. It was a military empire that dominated the territory that now we know as Mexico. But they had a very specific view on the world with very different coordinates and mythologies and understanding of what it was to be a human being, and the Spaniards and with their own understanding of Christianity and how that in a way ordered not only the cosmos but all reality that existed. They got together to make up something new that was Mexico is a product of the merging of those cultures. So in itself, it has always been a little bit contradictory and very, very, you use the term polarized, and I think it is in a way. The Mexican soul, if I may speak in those terms, it's something very, very contrasting in terms of the heritage that we get from Europe and we got from the pre-Hispanic or pre-colonial cultures. And that amounts to Mexican culture, if we can speak in those terms, being something sometimes very irrational in a way, sometimes even strange, I would say, to a certain point of view based on the logocentric European understanding of the world and human beings, but I think that shows itself in so many cultural manifestations that will still take place. For example, the way, and I mentioned this example because I think it is quite known over the world, the way we relate in Mexico and other Latino cultures to death, for example. And taking Dia de los Muertos, no? Mm-hmm. Where people, for example, go to the cemeteries and to have a lunch or breakfast with their beloved deceased relatives, and it is quite a normal thing to be at the same time a culture that celebrates life through fiesta and other cultural manifestations, but being quite aware that death is a part of life, and we take this not lightly, and it is there. I mean, it is said that as culture we laugh at that, but I would say that it is a respectful relationship to the fact that we're all going to be dead, as grim as it might sound.
Actually, we as Lithuanians, we probably understand you most through this prism, because we also have the Day of the Dead. and we also go to the cemeteries. We also light candles. If you take 100 years back, people also left some food. So it's like a pagan tradition that merged with Christianity. And actually, through the Day of the Dead, that's the tradition that we really understand what happens. In Mexico, you just do it in more, I would not say glamorous, but maybe it's more expressed. It's more vivid.
Yes.
But that's actually came from pagan roots in here as well. We really get you here.
No, and I think through these weeks that I've been spending in Lithuania, I've got to learn certain features of Lithuanian culture and history as well that I was before coming here quite ignorant about, and I should say this. And I understand that Lithuania was one of the European countries to be Christianized in the latest. And in that way, I mean, it's not only an understanding in terms of cultural coordinates, but I think that syncretism between paganism or pre-Christian religions in either in Lithuania or Mexico amounts to that mixing of cultural manifestations that in a way remained pagan, we can say, or pre-Christian, but that also take the shape of some Christian traditional, either as iconography or discourse. Like I had the chance to go to Neringa during the weekend, which is lovely and fantastic, and I took a walk and a hike through the Draguni mountain. I don't really remember the name of the mountain in Lithuania. My Lithuanian is not so good. I'm sorry about it. But I mean, all these statues of witches and dragons and demons and mushrooms as well. Yeah. And mushroom spirits. I mean, of course, it's a different take on maybe some sort of very well recognized or recognizable Christian symbolic universe. And that is also kind of the case in Mexico. Yes, I think there's a very interesting connection here.
So we have a connection, even though we are far away.
That is correct.
Speaking about connections, let's speak about communication in general. And we are living in this very interesting times, to say the least. We have COVID, we have some interesting funky presidents around the world, we have wars, so if somebody simulates us, those guys are getting wild. Simulates our reality. My question, do we actually live in a postmodern society? So we had postmodernism, where the narratives are equal, so there's no one true narrative, everything is debatable, questionable, but the problem is that we cannot get away from the question, what is the truth? Yeah. So where are we living now, and what are the features that could prove that we actually lived through postmodernism and now we're entering a new era? Are we?
I think we are. And of course, this either theory, philosophy, or this intellectual categories are for us humans to make sense of the conditions we live in. And I think that should be, and that has been in so many ways, the use of philosophy I think that is why philosophy is still relevant in a way, or should be at least, or should aim to be. And because we humans, and I think as media scholars or people dealing with communication, we might have a better chance to understand it, because we realize and we know in so many ways how this narratives or this media content actually shape the understanding we have of so many things. Of what Lithuania is, for example, what Mexico is, what is happening in terms of what we get from the news. We assume somewhat relates to factual narratives on things that are happening in the world and that are important for us to know. And I think that sometimes we forget the fact that the world is presented to us in a way or that we can make sense out of it directly. We need these ideas, these concepts, that we use, and that sometimes I like this metaphor, as problematic as metaphors can be, that of course we make up these glasses that which are called theories and concepts through which we look at reality. And I think this understanding of this postmodern condition in which narratives were equal, or we doubted the logic behind, or the use of reason to actually understand or make sense of the conditions we live in. We are entering a new era, and I think that the distinctive fact of it, or the feature, would be that we not only believe that narratives might be equal, and there's always two or three more or more sides to a story, but that we might not be as confident in the role reason has had throughout history in explaining our understanding of the world. And because one of the things that took place in the 20th century, and speaking very broadly, was that we started to think on and reflect on emotion and as one of one of the most distinctive faculties we human beings have, and that we also approach to the world not only cognitively but also emotionally, and that also shapes our understanding of the world. The thing is that and of course this relates to not only postmodernism and the post-truth, but it relates to the fact that we have not been taught, if I may put it like that, throughout history to deal with the fact that it is not only through rational discourse that we make sense of the world, but it is also through emotion. And I think one of the features we see playing out in social media, for example, is this emotional approach to every issue, and how we need to account for that and have the necessary conceptual tools to actually reckon with the fact that it is not only our cognitive faculties or capacities, but also our emotional side that is shaping our understanding of the world. And so far we have not, I think, gotten to a point when we can make sense of it all. And that, I think, that shows, that points to the fact of how messy public discourse, political life is right now. Because sometimes you get a very clear sense of two sides or two persons talking about what is seemingly the same issue, but they are coming from absolutely different worlds that are incommensurable to each other. And sometimes it's not only about those cognitive contents that have shaped their understanding of whatever, but to the ways they actually relate in affectional or emotional terms to those realities.
Mm-hmm. So what do you think led to that situation? Because if you ask people who lived like 50 years ago, they had very few narratives to follow. Mm-hmm. And you just need to follow, quote, the right one. Yeah. And now you have multiple and nothing makes sense anymore. So what do you think are the key factors that we kind of shifted from this more positivistic view of the world to more
well, I think,
one?
Of course, and I would make use of that narrative. I think it is a narrative of the history of ideas, of the history of philosophy, because I think it goes also to this postmodern challenge on rationality, and maybe not to the point that I was just discussing just a few minutes ago on how we cannot deal with emotion. We don't have the necessary tools to deal as a world, as cultures, as a political entity, maybe, with emotion. But one of the main challenges, I think, that postmodernity raised to our understanding of the world is the role authority plays in society, and why throughout history there has been a number of people, rather small, that got to, for example, decide on which narrative is the right one, and as you were saying. And we realize right now very clearly that, of course, that in a way is some sort of social convention. And but I think I think it's very good to be aware of that some of the narratives are rather conventional. They could have been done in so many different ways. But I think the reaction right now, we're still in this sort of maybe reaction to that reckoning or that understanding. We might be in the point where we think that the result then, or the plausible, maybe good outcome for that would be then everyone is entitled to choose the narrative of his wishing. And I think that speaks to the fact that we are not able to understand each other with the narratives that we might have chosen. Because as long as everyone gets to pick any understanding of any issue that he or she wishes, out of whatever reason that they might think of, nothing actually assures us that there's going to be some common ground to actually let us know that we're speaking in somewhat the same terms. So I think in a way it goes back to the postmodern challenge on authority, and also in media. And maybe this is also the media theorist or media scholar in me talking, because one of the main manifestations socially of that challenge or that structural changes in authority is the way media content is disseminated right now. And this, I think this can be shown in the shift from this broadcast models of producing and disseminating content, where there's always a gatekeeper that gets to decide what is aired through the waves and broadcasting, what is printed in the news, printed or either in print or in digital, and social media, for example, in which everyone gets, by certain, of course, dynamics that are very complex in themselves, and everyone gets to decide what is it they want to share with the world. And sometimes by some research that can be somewhat clearly identified. Sometimes it is kind of a mystery. Some of those narratives or contents get viral and have an enormous impact. And of course, that reshapes our whole understanding of narratives, the power those stories have.
So could we claim that instead of searching for truth, we just choose the sides, pick sides?
I think we do in a way, yes. I think we can say that. But I will maybe point to the fact that in a way, not entirely, has always been the case. And I'm gonna just very briefly here take as an example Elizabeth Noelle-Neumann's work on the theory of the spiral of silence, and where she explains the dynamics of public opinion, and she understands public opinion as a force that sometimes pushes any individual to conformity with the social environment he or she inhabits, and she explained, and I think she's a very good writer, and she writes very, very well. She cares about the style in her writing, so she uses a lot of metaphors and examples in everyday situation. And one of the things one of the ways she usually describes public opinion is the choosing of sides. And of course, she's thinking about the time and that she was in which she had to live, and the rising up in Germany of the Nazi Party, for example. How people were not willing, were not totally okay or directly opposed to that, maybe didn't rise their voices up out of fear of being left behind or the consequences that might bring. Yes, we choose which side we want to be in, and we normally do that because we are social beings, and we don't want to be left behind or be isolated from our groups. But I think that even if we were quite aware of those dynamics, it has gone into a point that we might forget that there's other groups or other sides to our own. And our own side might not be the only one that is right in every front.
Yeah, but we usually hate those people. They are alien to our ideas. How to live with that, how to take your opponent as your friend.
Yeah, Of course, I think that is precisely the challenges that societies and particularly democracies are facing right now. Because sadly we know, and we have a lot of examples where that sort of dynamics gets us, and where is it going to get us? But yes, and we need to rethink the social consensus of the living together in societies that can account for this groups of people having very different views on the world and still be willing to live together.
And that's very important for the politicians,
Absolutely.
for example, who need to understand their electorate base. So let's speak about those folks, because they're interesting animals, especially in this day and age when social media is around. And speaking about how their communication changed through the years, when they had a strictly planned media campaigns to direct engagement with their audiences, how do you think, what is the future profile of successful politician that knows how to navigate those murky waters of postmodernism? And what's the formula for them to go into the public, but at the same time don't be divided by those mini narratives, and how to strike how to do the home run and be proficient by using those tools?
And again, the $1 million question.
Yes, we're gonna pay this after the show.
Absolutely. But once again, I hope I'm gonna invoke some principles of media theory in this case, and this theorization of media that we know now as mediatization, that in a way postulates that since we live now, and in contrast to maybe last century, dominated by mass media, right now we live in an age, this group of theoreticians or this tradition says, of deep mediatization, in the sense that we are always connected somehow. If we're carrying a mobile phone and that sort of thing, as you know, we are constantly communicating, we're constantly receiving media content. This is a different structural setting for communication to take place. And within that deep communication age, and of course, I'm talking about theory, but I think those ideas have already been translated, so to speak, to actual practice in political communication. And I think they're quite accurate. One of the things, and I'm quoting a scholar, Stig Javard, and who's Danish and has been writing a lot about this kind of ideas, is that one of the maybe two main characteristics that defined communication, and particularly political communication, in this age of deep mediatization would be the personalization of communication and the conversational character, or, which is a strange word, conversationalization of communication. And of course, I mean, this might this might not sound very new, because we know that for a while, social media and other forms of digital communication mainly have been successfully exploiting these two characteristics, making communication more personal and making communication more like a conversation. But I think that current models of political communication are actually assuming those features as a given in as long as any either advisor or politician want to have a successful model of communication, of political communication either. But the thing is, and going back to some of the issues we've discussed before, I think that sort of formula, abstract formula, is kind of right. Communication should be personal, and we now have different means of technology to actually achieve some sort of personalization that we did not have before. But also communication takes the form of some sort of conversation, of an ongoing conversation. But the thing is, and going back again to the very important and deep underlying issues, which kind of conversation do we want to have in society? Which kind of conversation do we want to have in political communication or ruling public affairs? Is it a conversation? That only includes a number of very very active and somewhat polarized, extreme views, very core of any ideology or any idea, or do we want to have a conversation that actually can somehow be somewhat diverse, that accounts for different views of the topic? And I think that sadly, some of the most visible models of this two-principle strategy, so to speak, that we have been witnessing in the last 2 years, maybe lean more towards this idea of a very, very, very evident personalization of political communication in the form of a very of the politician, the candidate, rather than the ideas, or rather than the party, or rather than instead of a program to actually for government or group of policies. And the conversation, we know it's rather, and I wouldn't even call it a conversation, but like this echo chamber in which there's a group of people that have the same ideas. They're just repeating those ideas to themselves, assuring themselves that they are the ones that got it right and everyone else is wrong. And I don't think that is a real conversation, but that sort of redundant communication can take some shape of conversation, and I think that is effective.
But at the same time, isn't this a bit of a dangerous field for politicians? Because, like, if you're, that's going to be controversial, but if you are too close to the public, you lose your aura of being, I would not say superior, but above. And then you might do some stupid stuff, upload some bad pictures, do some notorious things, and then you are again on the social media, and you are the same as the people. So this kind of situation cost heads for a few kings when people realize that they're like us, they are mortal, they could be taken away, and we could take their place. So for the politicians, what you think is a good balance of going to the public and being true, but at the same time securing not only just personal space, but also this kind of image of being a bit above the public, and representing the public.
Yes, and I think this is good. We once again come to the fact of media as structures, being these agents that shape our forms of communication, interaction, and in the end, a human organization. And because with this on this topic, I would maybe grab one of the pieces of this very hard puzzle that we were discussing earlier, and I want to bring back the issue of authority. As you mentioned, for some politicians and some kings back in the age, this realization or this reckoning that they were mortal, that they could be, they were not chosen by some sort of higher power, but they just another human being. Of course, that might have been a fatal blow in the terms of the social acknowledgement of their authority. But I think one of the main understanding that has shifted, not recently, but throughout the 20th century and this postmodern and post-postmodern condition, is the way we relate to authority as a source of power. And of course, I know there might be a lot of very different examples, and I'm not suggesting that this is just a one-way street, but for a politician nowadays, it will surely, or most surely, be less. It would be less dangerous, so to speak, to be seen as a man of the people, and than it was for an ancient king, for example, or a politician 30 or 40 years ago. And I think that also speaks to the fact that the public, most citizens have a very having a general acknowledgement of these structures of authority and power, not having worked in the interest of most people, and the thing is there an alternative to it? I think that is a great question, that it might not be as addressed as the fact that those structures should have done more for everybody, and I think that is correct. But I mean, this discontent to social authority or political authority or the power makes it for politicians to actually, I think that it nudges them in a way to take the chance to present themselves as outsiders. And I think that's one of the reasons we see a lot of politicians right now that and I learned that this is the case in Lithuania as well.
Yeah, the same trend.
Yeah, exactly. People that are outsiders of the mainstream political circles, and that plays well because people, a lot of voters, of course, not everyone, but a lot of voters, a lot of the great parts of the public, they actually don't trust those structures anymore, and they want to see someone that is just like them. That had to do something for themselves and get by and maybe get a job, not live out of politics and this kind of thing. But of course, I mean, there's always a line. There's always a line that should not be crossed. And I think one of the things that it is a clear don't is if you want to present yourself as a man of the people and keep it, so to speak, safely for you as an aspiring politician or someone that aspires to get some sort of representation of the public in any form of government or level of government. You need some consistency in that representation. I think one of the I think, of course, one of the things we see when digital communication is this very volatile state of public opinion, and one day you can be a hero, and the next day you can be a villain, and I think most of the time that comes not directly through the outcomes of decisions or policies, but I think that comes to the character that it is assumed on the voters, on the electorate, of any politician being someone that actually cares or acts in the interest of the majority of the public because he's seen as a man or a woman of the people.
So, okay, let's model a situation. I quit the job at university because, well, new age, and decided to become a politician. So my best strategy is to be populist again. Like, populist is the new fashion, and I'm going, yay, everything is fake, and those politicians are lying to you, drain the swamp, all that kind of jazz. Because I've seen politicians, and in Lithuania we have cases which not only politicians but influencers and social actors that kind of follow the agenda of one certain idea, and they Yahoo, full on the message board and have an opinion about every question, and then some more tricky question comes along the way, and they get burned, they get canceled, and all the bad stuff happens. So, but you say that I should still bet on being a bit populist and saying that no, they did it in the wrong way, and I would be the better guy for putting up the fire.
I mean, I hope I'm not. This is not taken as.
No, it's just a question as a philosopher, as a political researcher.
Yes.
And my point is not we can start to think from the value system. What kind of added value do you create for the society? So if we be more realistic here, and if I want to make a good campaign,
yes.
And we, especially the cases that we are familiar. If you look at the United States, the famous or infamous, I don't know how to call it, the electoral campaign between Trump and Biden, and you had like two very different kind of ways of how they advertise themselves, and you see that the results of the election were like near tie. And up until this day, we have some waves that coming back from those elections, and we don't know what's going to happen in 2024, I guess.
Yes.
So if I'm I don't want to say want to be Trump because I don't.
I hope
but
you don't.
a new prosperous politician who wants to get his chair, maybe do some good for the public, of course, but at the same time, I want some viable political strategy.
Yes.
And you are a consultant, and you say, bet on this horse, you won't lose, or you have a bigger chances of winning.
Yes. I totally understand the question. Of course, I was not. My purpose here is not to make a chant on the goodness of populist politics, but I think that is a fact to understand it, and I understand that, and of course. This modeling of a situation is good because you get to talk as from hypotheticals and not maybe making any sort of pronouncement.
Yeah, it's a fake scenario.
Absolutely, totally fake. This has never happened. And but I think that and of course I will answer, but I will point to the fact that one of the things should be. Is always with media and communication, the content of communication and these narratives that are disseminated and get circulate among the public, that in spite of how they originate, and the other is the structure of media, and how the structure of media. Either if it is institutional in terms of which companies or which broadcasters are the major players at any given point in time in a society, or how media technologies afford for certain communication manifestations and some effects on the public. And right now, at this moment, if the idea would be, or let's say that as a political consultant, I might be not very principled, but I might be aware of the fact that a lot of research shows that what plays out best in social media in terms of getting reactions from the public is the excitement of emotion. And particularly some emotions, mostly anger, and if I don't really care about or what this might bring to our social life and the conditions of living and the fact that we need each other as a society, and my only aim or purpose would be. Coming with this strategy for any politician or to be or actual politician to actually get his message resonate the most in social media, let's say. I mean, certainly scientific research points to the fact that it is through the use of social media with very emotionally charged messages that inspire anger. But one again, as maybe when I was speaking about this media structure, what affordances it gives to communication might sound a little bit abstract, but this is how it actually plays out in reality. I mean that configuration of media as broadcast media afforded different arrangements of the public and different narratives and different discourses. In society, this structure of media give us these affordances. But another thing is, as I said, the content, the media content that we want to create and disseminate. And because, I mean, even so, the fact that research shows that what gets more easily viral in terms of that it resonates with more people more rapidly, it might be this angry messages. I mean that shouldn't be. That doesn't necessarily take us to the fact that should be always a strategy, because I think it goes back. And of course, and now I'm gonna maybe get way back to the origins, not only of philosophy but maybe of Western culture in the classics, in Aristotle. Politics is something that speaks of the affairs of public affairs of things that might have happened in other very different way than the way they did, because we're dealing with human action, and human action is not it's not deterministic in the sense that we need to do. There's only one way of doing things. We can get things sorted out through very different courses of action, and this sphere of media, or these conditions of media, in a way, also making very clear that what plays out the best in terms of reaching more audiences does not mean that we should go that way. And I think that's also the point, also in Aristotle, where politics go hand in hand with ethics, in terms of what is it that we want to do with our actions, how do we want to shape the world with our actions, how do we want to shape political discourse with our actions. And of course, I mean, this has always been the case. There have been very opportunistic politicians or prominent people that with total disregard of what they might end up producing in society, they just want to get with their own way of doing things and work only to their own benefit. But there are other people, and gladly still, I think, in every country, that actually they think of the conditions of living in society, and in spite of maybe those angry messages being kind of because I think that's tricky in a way, as easily as that might be, that is also a strategy, and you pointed this out, that can also somewhat easily backfire.
And of course, this backfiring might be very unpleasant for the politician himself. And we have some angry neighbors which betted their horses on I would say on imperialistic glory, and at the same time on anger on the West, that they kind of abandoned. And I'm speaking about Russia here.
Yes.
So this backfired. It took 20 years, maybe more, because this was not with the Putin this happened, but this mentality was there. And society, it's getting angrier and angrier, and it demands action, demands response, and demands results. And what happens if you as a politician don't show them? So maybe we should, before allowing people into parliament, into these big chairs, or even to allow them to go as candidates for the office, we should mandatory force them through the ethics classes for them just to understand what they might achieve with their kind of intentions. Okay, so since our time is about over, I want to ask you one final question.
Sure.
With all this obscure media landscape, with all these technologies, with all these possibilities to communicate, to reach and find information, to fight and create propaganda, are we better off? Are we going for the better?
I think we can. I think, once again, human condition is not deterministic. And there's one of the things that I learned, and since our time is about to be done, let me answer with the help of one Lithuanian experience I had, which is visiting the Museum of Genocide and Occupations in Gediminas Street, and I think, of course, it's a overwhelming and very dramatic experience to go in there and see what is still, to get to know about recent history of Lithuania, because it is still quite recent. But and of course, in any way I want to pretend that I'm making sense of a very complex situation and experience. But one of the, I think, things that you can take away from visiting such a place is that freedom is always something that is worth fighting for, and I think that is one of the most distinctive characteristics of human action. We are not always determined to act in a particular way, but of course, sometimes you gotta fight for your freedom either if it is from tyranny, in political terms, but either from the affordances that are provided by any form of communication or any technological structure that seems to point in a particular direction. Of course, I would agree, and I don't think I'm pessimistic, but I would agree that maybe the horizon that we see before us might be grim in terms of things are messy, certainly, and there does not seem to be an easy way out. But I think we can do that, and I think we have the adequate both technical and intellectual resources to make sense of this very, very complex panorama. And I think, if I might say so, that is one of the reasons why communication studies and the study of communication is important. Because that, I think, it relates to a very distinctive condition of human beings, right? At this moment in history, we cannot go by our daily lives or take on this very important and relevant and life-changing questions if we are oblivious to the fact that media, in so many different ways, and communication practices, they shape not only our understanding of the world, but our possibilities to influence that world through our action, and sometimes through our communicative action. So I think one of course, there's not, I'm not suggesting this is a recipe to be followed and everything will magically get better. But one of the things that we should do as a society is understand in a deeper and better way the role media is playing right now in the construction of social reality, of political discourse. And I think that should be one of the missions of us scholars and teachers in media studies.
That's a nice ending. So, Professor Mariano Navarro, I really thank you for this conversation. It was a pleasure.
It was my pleasure entirely. Thank you so much.
Let's hope that you get back to Lithuania after some time and eat cepelinai again. And I hope you like it.
I will gladly do so, both coming back and having cepelini.
Okay. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you so much.